Great. And we're back for another episode of Alfacast. I'm Mike Winter, and I'm here as always with Dr. Bear Paul Lando up here on the beautiful undammed Smith River in the beautiful state of Jefferson on the border of California and Oregon. We're here today with an exciting guest, someone who I've been following for years, helping me in my amateur growing skills. We have Curtis Stone here, the urban farmer, and today we'll dive deep into all sorts of fun topics. If you're new to Alfa Vedic, we're an off-grid herb farm and health co-op up here, like I said, on the border of California and Oregon. We're here to empower folks to get more self-sufficient, really learn about sovereignty and a lot of topics which we'll discuss today. If you are interested in learning more about what we do, you can just go to our website, alfavedic.com. That's ALFAVEDIC.com, and find out all about us. If you want to support us, the best way to do that is to buy our products, which we handcraft right there on the farm. And you can see that on our website. And you can also join us on Telegram at t.me/AlfaVedic or on our Discord at alfavedic.com/Discord. Like I said, today we'll have a timely roundtable on a number of topics with Curtis Stone. He's a farmer, author, speaker, and consultant. His area of expertise is in quick-growing, high-value annual vegetables for direct consumer market streams. His book, The Urban Farmer, demonstrates organic, intensive techniques with a focus on business and systems to streamline labor in production. He offers a new way to think about farming, one where quality of life and profitability coexist. Curtis's farm, Green City Acres, is located in, excuse me if I butcher this, Kelowna, BC, Canada, and was established in 2010. In an 8-month growing season, the farm generates over $75,000 per year on only 1/3 of an acre. This is done by specializing in a select group of high-value, quick-growing crops that allow for multiple plantings in the same beds, as well as calculated intercropping strategies. The farm has been recognized internationally as flagship example of how profitable and productive urban agriculture can be. And of course, Curtis has really been a pioneer in the media side of things as someone who's been putting out quality content for years on YouTube, and actually opened up his own platform as well. And what is that called again, Curtis? Field to
Fromthefield.tv.
Fromthefield.tv. Yep. And I've personally been following Curtis for a number of years now, just geeking out late night on farming. He was amazing at going to other farms and really getting down to the nitty gritty of production methods and what other people were doing. And got to be honest, I didn't know that Curtis was kind of on the level in terms of other things like the sovereignty movement and self-sufficiency. I mean, obviously as a farmer, that's always something you're focused on. But until recently, I started to discover that about Curtis, and it really, it's funny. I was really following you more on the kind of farming stuff. And wow, man, you're really covering all the bases, and it's really cool to see someone like you, a Canadian out there, really pushing truth. So it's quite an honor to have you on today, and we'll just kind of let the conversation go wherever it needs to go. Of course, we've got Dr. Bear Lando on here today, and he's sporting his State of Jefferson hat. How are you doing today, Bear?
I'm doing good. I didn't know, Curtis, that you were into some of the, non-consent, reclaim your correct status and that sort of thing either. So in honor of you today, I did wear my State of Jefferson hat here. And it's more of an ideological movement that started in Northern California, Southern Oregon, where we are right here.
I'm familiar with it. And, absolutely.
Yeah. So there's another movement called New California State, which is actually the real deal that's making ground. And we're going to do a whole podcast on that someday. I'm the rep for Del Norte County for that whole thing. But man, I couldn't think of a more timely interview to have today than with you. You know, our entire nation has turned into a mob masturbating kind of affair. Yeah. And meanwhile, we're running out of food. And everybody's complying and consenting in their own demise. And, here we are. It's crazy. just a little background on us, and just so we really relate to the amazing things you've done with your farm up there, and just your whole model that could feed the world basically. I started in the mid 70s in our first off-grid homestead. I was working out of hospitals, and so I did shifts so I could commute back and forth to the boonies, do my little shifts, and go back home. And then we moved first to Fiji, so we were out in the boonies, definitely off-grid there. And then from there to Hawaii, we had a plantation, off-grid plantation for a good number of years. And then we had our, off-the-grid clinic there too.
Wow.
And when we moved back to the mainland, we've had two off-grid self-sufficient little farms. We're on the second one that we're developing here. We had to move to this one because we needed more space and everything to go to the next level. So here we are again, and that's why I've just been a big fan of your work, just showing people how you can do what we're doing, on more land masses and everything, but you're just being as productive in the middle of an urban environment. So great to have you here. Thanks for being with us. And you know how we operate here. Just take it wherever you want to go, and we'll chime in.
Right on. Well, hey, it's an honor to be with such kindred spirits. So thanks for having me, guys. I've definitely watched a number of your episodes before. So when you reached out to me, I was already very familiar with what you guys do. And yeah, it's kind of funny with, the sovereign stuff. I've been into it for a long time. I got to a point where I just didn't care about coming out of the closet with this stuff. I mean, I guess I kind of came out of the closet as a libertarian 6 years ago or so, and I got a bit of backlash for it. But I actually found that, because I've had a career as a content creator for a number of years now. Like I closed my farm officially 2 years ago, at least for commercial production. I'm still farming, but I'm not commercially farming anymore. So I closed that 2 years ago. But even before that, I was making a decent living as a content creator. And it's funny when you get in that world, there's a tendency for people to avoid controversy and like you kind of wanted to stay in your lane kind of thing, and a lot of people, I hear that all the time, even still today. I get trolls on my my YouTube or whatever. Curtis, you're a gardener. What the hell you don't know anything about this, not talking about this stuff, but I actually found it was actually far more rewarding and actually commercially rewarding just to come out and be honest. And so I started coming out and talking about this stuff. And yeah, of course you get a small group of haters, but you also convert a smaller but very powerful group of people that will really support you. And it's been a kind of a neat journey over the last couple of years. I started telling my story about my first conditional acceptance to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and that was my biggest red pill moment. I guess I should probably just tell that story for the viewers who might not be familiar with me. But so I'd been a commercial farmer for 10 years, but this happened in 2016. I got a letter from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, which is like your FDA, I guess, in the US. And they said, because this greenhouse that I'm in now, I used to do massive scale commercial microgreens in here. I'd crank out 400 flats a week. And according to the CFIA, the microgreens are considered a high risk crop because they're like a sprout, but they're not. But that's what they say. And so they informed me that they're going to be coming to inspect my farm at this date and this time. And it didn't really look like any kind of negotiation. It's like, this is what we're doing, and you have to be there for 4 hours. And at this point, I had got to know a man named Cal Washington fairly well. You guys might be familiar with Cal, part of the In Power movement, and
yeah, really we had Josh Del Sol on our
you had
podcast.
Josh. Yeah, that's right. I actually seen that episode. And so Cal, was my proverbial Morpheus. Really, kind of took me down the rabbit hole, held my hand with some of the stuff that was like really deep. And I'm not even talking about conspiracy theory stuff. I'm just talking about conspiracy fact, just the acts and the statutes and all that bullshit. And so I basically responded to them and gave them a conditional acceptance. Hey, I'd be happy to have you here on my farm. this time, so on and so forth. Upon presentation of these three things, I need certified true copy of the act, which proves royal assent. And they can't prove that because there is no queen here anymore. She died in 1901. Queen Elizabeth is just a corporation soul that is just a racketeering thing. But so I said, I want that. I said, 2, I want a copy of your oath of allegiance, that you operate in good faith. I said, 3, I want a consulting fee for my time, because you don't expect me to work for you for free, do you? And then I said, you got 21 days to respond. And if you don't, the offer's null and void. And basically the guy came back like I just smacked him in the face and he didn't see it coming. And he probably took it upstairs to the deputy minister. And those are the deep state guys here in Canada. The ministers are the elected ones. They don't really know anything, but the deputies, who are often the guys that are there for 20, 30 years, he probably took it upstairs. And the guy was like, yeah, well, we can't do anything. And so he came back and basically just said, okay, see, I can't give you any of that. And I said, great, no problem, sir. Have a great day. And then that was it. And so 6 months went by, and I have to be honest, I was a little nervous during that phase. I was like, shit, is this going to come back? Like, are they going to come and bring the hammer down on me? But they never did. And so that's when I first really learned all this stuff I'd been, that I learned, and I guess I understood all the stuff I've been learning about was actually real because it worked. And since then, I've seen it work dozens of times, not only with myself, but other farmers that I've worked with over the years and people that I've got to know. And because we do have this de facto state here, just like the US, but the US is different because you have the foundation of a de jure government with the Constitution of 1776. And then you have the de facto 1871 Organic Act, where, and you guys know more about the US than I do, but that's my principal understanding. But in Canada, we only have a de facto state. We don't even have the foundation of a de jure. And so that also creates challenges. But yeah, man, I mean, when I did that kind of pulled me down the rabbit hole. And then it was a year ago, I was on the West Coast, Vancouver Island, just doing some filming work for my membership site from the field. And also had an opportunity to go visit some really cool farmers that were having some problems with the Agricultural Land Commission, which is this, Marxist land grab scam. And I heard some testimonies of people that would just broke my heart, family farms that had been 3-4 generations running. And then these bureaucrats come in and tell them that they can't build a second home for their grandparents so that the grandparents can help take care of the kids while the kids run the farm, and so the great grandkids, like, beautiful stuff that should be part of the American and Canadian dream. But it's been incentivized out through regulations. And I got really pissed off when I heard these stories, because they were bankrupting these farmers. And I started to kind of see the big picture and connecting it back to Agenda 21 and 2030. And this get everybody off the land, get them pushed into cities, right? And I started to see how these policies were actually implemented on the federal, provincial, and local levels. And you can't really look at their policies and go, oh, it's directly correlated to this act and whatever in Agenda 21, but you just see the incentives. And so I started to kind of get a picture of what it was like for farmers. And me being a farmer myself, and somebody that has spent 10 years building my career and all this, I found that the sovereignty stuff, because for a while I was learning this stuff, I didn't really know how it fit with me being a farmer. I didn't really know what my calling would be with this. But then after getting to know a lot of farmers and hearing their stories, and then I started doing the research. I started reading the acts themselves, and I found so many loopholes in them that I felt like, yeah, this is something that farmers need to hear about. And so, some people like to hate on me for talking about this stuff, but I don't care, because I think this is the last stand. I mean, farmers need to know this stuff, because if we don't, we're all going to get kicked off our land, and we're all going to lose our sovereignty. And sovereignty, as you guys know, is multi-leveled, right? There's sovereignty of the straw man, the person, the man, and all that. There's sovereignty of your food. There's sovereignty of your health, which Bear, you're obviously deep involved with. And they're all layers, but they all come together because we all need to eat, right? And so that's been a big thing for me.
Yeah. So, Curtis, real quick, we'll just back up to the conditional acceptance. Before I say that, though, the U.S. is and always has been a colony of Great Britain. So we were never emancipated. But anyway, that's a different
Yeah.
story. Conditional acceptance, just a real brief comment for the audience that maybe isn't familiar with that. We are operating in commerce. So everything you get from any government agency is a commercial offer, like, hey, would you like to buy this, or would you like to pay this bill that we're presenting you with? And to be in honor, stay in honor within that commercial system, you always want to answer. That, the most powerful thing anybody can do, if they go down that path, is to open all their mail and answer it immediately.
Yes.
You never just want to let things, oh man, I'm afraid of that, thing from the IRS. I don't want to deal with it. No, you open it up, you answer it, and then you conditionally accept. You say, well, okay, I'll accept your terms. I'll pay that or do whatever you want me to do under the condition that. Yeah. So if you'd like to elaborate on that, because I know those are terms that not everybody's familiar with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could talk for hours on where it all comes from, and maybe that's not that important. But yeah, the world operates under this uniform commercial code. And because we've all been commodified, commercialized, and compartmentalized since we were born, that's just the system that we're in. The way I like to think about it is we're all swimming in the holy sea, and Christ wants us to walk on water to get back on the land. And we're all in this maritime admiralty system, which uses territorial and internal waters to get us into a citizenship. And that ship is the vehicle in which our personhood is attached. And that's how we navigate their waters. And that's what they refer to it as. I don't know so much about it in the US, but in Canada, as Canada is defined in the Interpretations Act of Canada, there you go. We are in internal and territorial waters. So the definition of Canada is, for greater certainty, Canada includes the internal and territorial waters. And so those who are familiar with legalese know about how includes is used in a very tricky way. And most people in common parlance assume that it just means like a greater inclusion. You hear social justice warriors talking about being inclusive. But in legalese, inclusive is the opposite of it. Actually means it's very exclusive. It means that and only that. And it's so easy to prove. I mean, people like to debate. I get a lot of people that try to debate me on the includes thing, but then all you got to do is look at the context. Look at how includes is used in thousands, if not millions, of legal documents, and it's always very specific. And the counter argument I make is, if somebody says, "Oh, well, includes is a greater inclusion," well, then it's like, well, okay, then why didn't they say it? So, one example is the Canada one. Canada includes the territorial internal waters. So if Canada included the land, why wouldn't they just say it, right? Because legal documents are very specific. Anybody who's gone through a legal process with lawyers and all that stuff, it's all very, very, very specific. They don't leave things open to interpretation unless they want you to, and that's how they trick us, is they let us make assumptions. Another example is in the Motor Vehicles Act of British Columbia. Accident is defined as includes an intentional collision. So if it didn't include just an intentional collision, why wouldn't they just say it? It's not like they have a budget for words. Like, oh, we can only afford to use 6 words for this definition, and then we got to move on to the next one. No. It's not like that. And so they always trick us that way. But the conditional acceptance is kind of the, there's, down in my journey with all this, I found that there's remedy in many different ways. When you look at the law, there's remedy within the legal, there's remedy within the ecclesiastic laws, and then there's remedy within the common law. But they can't always see one another. And so sometimes it's just easier to operate within the commercial system, which is the legal system, the bar association and all that. And that, for me, that's the path of least resistance. So a conditional acceptance is great because you can just stay within the water, their territorial waters on the ship, and just use some of their own things against them. And that's usually enough to get them off your back. Now, if they want to go further and further and further and push, there's other remedy out there. I mean, and at the same time, like, like Bear, I haven't been doing this nearly as long as you. So I'm still a student of it, and I'm not out here trying to offer people remedy. I've just been open about sharing things that I've seen work or things that have worked for me. But I realize that, I don't know everything on this, because it's, you could literally spend a lifetime getting a full grasp of how all this stuff works.
Yeah. And I don't pretend to be an expert either. I was, taught by some of the pioneers, and we all went into court systems. And as I was telling you before the show, the proof that we didn't know everything is, half the guys ended up dead or in jail. So, But on the other hand, because we took some arrows in our backs, then the next generation was able to take it to the next level. So I'm still learning from the newbies out there that are taking it to the next level. I personally don't have the time anymore, to spend my life challenging the IRS and going into court. I held up a book that the audience didn't see because you were talking. And I did this last episode too. It's a uniform commercial code. And as you can see, I kind of study mine a little. I have every page tabbed, and because I've used this a lot. But the point is, if you take that uniform commercial code, that same book is operative in every country in the world without exception. And translated into the mother tongue. So I get tickled when people accuse me of being a conspiracy theorist. It's like, okay, so you tell me how that same code got implemented in every country in the world, verbatim, word for word, and there's not some kind of conspiracy behind that.
Yeah,
they're
thing I wanted theorists.
Yeah. It's simply astounding, The other thing I wanted to throw out there and see if you've had any experience with this, because I'm really down this road, and I think it's especially important for farmers, is the issue of land patents, or what you might even call allodial title. We're in the process. Yeah, can you have any experience or want to speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit. I've been involved with a group of farmers that have been digging for quite some time, and I've seen some of these land patents here in Canada. They go back to King John. I've actually seen some. They're copies, but they're copies of the original. The place that I get hung up with that is, can a person actually receive an allodial title if your person is a corporation that's owned by something else? And so a lot of guys I know who have played in that space haven't really gotten anywhere with it because they haven't fully uncoupled themselves from the matrix, the commercial system. So I don't really know what to do with it, to be honest. Like, I've seen the documents, I've understood some of the process to get there. But as far as taking that getting that land patent, and then basically going into a land titles office and actually doing something with it, I'm not actually sure. I've seen some people do things where they put things in trust, and then the trust is visible to the legal system, but they can't touch it because it's in the private. But I can't say that I've seen somebody come out with a full remedy with that. Have you?
Yeah. In fact, we work with a gentleman up in Southern Oregon who got his start in the mining business, and so was really an expert about pieces of land and staking claims, and that's how he learned the process, and that's where I learned from. And the land patent in the U.S. anyway has never been successfully challenged.
Wow.
It's never lost. And I would even suggest that your ability to uncouple from the system is based on returning to the land, and a land patent is one of the best ways to do it. So it's a 5-part process, which we won't go through, but it really doesn't require, at least in the States, I don't know, it's probably totally different in Canada, but in the States, all you have to do is take your warranty deed, you get the meets and bounds on it, you take to the Bureau of Land Management, to make sure it checks up with them. And then you do a quit claim on it, and then you go through another process where you trace through all the prior occupants or people that claimed ownership on the land, and there's a process with that. Then you give it to the recorder. If the recorder won't do it, I'm going to lean the recorder's ass in the county and make them do it. Right. And or you can just do a public notice. But at the end of it, it really doesn't require, like it's not so much having to do with, your corrected status as an individual to separate yourself from your corporate status. It's really going to give you more weight in order to do that status change later on for yourself. That's just my experience with it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I totally understand it from, I guess, the practical sense of how it's done, in the sense that now you have a place to put your feet, right? That you can establish, because it's a allodial title on the land, but it's a allodial title of the body as well, right? And we could even expand that to the allodial title of the spirit, a allodial title to all these things. They're all levels of sovereignty, and it's quite amazing how it all connects. Having said all that, I'm beginning to wonder, and this is kind of where I've been on my path, is I see a massive transformation happening in the whole system right now. And I believe we're at a spiritual junction. This is what I believe. I can't prove this. I haven't read hundreds of documents on this like I have with Canadian law, but I believe we're at a spiritual junction. That's at my core. That's what I feel. And I had an opportunity to sit at a table with 3 men that have all been in this whole sovereign space. They've done their trusts. They've done all that stuff, express trusts under common law, Grantham Taylor Hughes trusts, all this stuff. These guys have spent, between the 3 of them, over 100 years doing this stuff in courts and all this. And I sat with these guys. I was really honored to have the time with them. And I just said to them, hey, I'm a young guy. I mean, I'm 40. I'm not that young, but I'm 40. I got 2 young kids. I've got my wife. We're really just getting started as a family. If you were me now, knowing what you know and what you've been through, because these guys have all been through the ringer, would you go through this full process and really go at this? And they said, no, because the whole deck is going to get shuffled, and it's getting shuffled now. And once the dust settles, we're all going to have to figure out where we are. Are we on the land? Are we still in the water?
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. And a lot of people are always asking me about doing all these processes. And I tell them 2 things. Number one, I don't think we have time for you to learn all this stuff in the first place and implement it. And number 2, myself, I have a philosophical problem with it all now. And not that I think there's anything wrong about it, but like take the land patent. Okay, I know the process, I'm doing it and everything, and I see the efficacy on one level. But okay, so now I'm reverting back to my original land grant that was based on the Spanish, conquistadors stealing the land from somebody else, and then then it's a grant. And it's like, okay, now I'm going back to where somebody stole it from somebody else. So. You're always in that same box when you're playing this game. And then when it comes to status correction and everything, which I've done all that, I wouldn't do it over again, because it's like, who the hell are they? I mean, why am I even talking to these people in the first place?
I know.
Exactly. It's like giving them credit that somehow I have to answer their processes, that they just made this crap up out of thin air in the first place, to deceive us all. So I agree. We're in the midst of a consciousness shift. And I think there's going to be some events that's going to make this all a moot point anyway.
Yeah. All the rules are based on the corporate creations from the 1400s, 1500s, the East India Company. It's funny you talk about water in Canada. I mean, Canada was founded by the Hudson Bay Company.
That's right.
And so we're just playing with those rules still that are by these corpse entities that were created to allow for the dead to rule the world, so that that can maintain their control with board members that can just, from these bloodlines, that can just keep continuing it. And I agree, I feel like it's important to have private property back in the day, because that would allow people to kind of have a fighting chance. But you are right. And Bear, I was triggered a bit about this with the discussion we had on the farm earlier this summer with our permaculture guild about the problems with private property, because we're kind of just trained as Americans, right? Like private property, private rights. But it does all go back to just like the original charters that were created by Europeans who came here and just stole the land from the natives. And it's like, why do we get those rights? And I think this consciousness evolution is going to be about us coming together communally as tribes, and I hate saying the word tribe because that gets into tribalism, but as collectives on our land, where we appreciate that we all own it together. We're all spiritually connected to Mother Earth. We're all ambassadors for her here. And so there can be new systems where we have more of a sacred understanding of our connection and the way our economics can work as we kind of share the land, as we work together. I think we just got to get rid of corporations altogether.
Yes, 100%.
I think corporations need to go.
Yep.
And one thing that I'm active in, Curtis, is in kind of pushing the new future of technology for decentralization, and getting, with cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and not private blockchains, not corporatized blockchains, but actual consensus-based public blockchains, where they're almost more like a utility, where we all just have the consensus. We have what's called decentralized autonomous organizations, where we all just kind of have voting rights on things. Yep. And then we have, so here's what I was kind of thinking about last night, because I've been watching a lot of old movies. Like I've been watching like Mutiny on the Bounty and stuff, where it's like all the European countries going to take over, the West. And you see this, like these two rival ideas of humanity, where you have the indigenous cultures who really bless the land, and they stay in a very kind of conscientious way, where they manage the land properly, but they don't have a sense of moving forward in terms of progression. And then we have the classic Western thought, which dominated civilization for millennia, which goes back all the way to the Syrians, to the Greeks, the Romans, which was more of an idea of progressing towards a bigger understanding of where humanity can go. And I think that's powerful. That was like the American dream, right? We saw so much great innovation from the 20th century, but the problem with that always was based around corporations and companies, which were really created in the Roman times.
Yes.
And this was all about scarcity and taking over resources, and of course mercantilism, which was all about taking over the world. So I feel like finally we're hopefully at a place where we can combine the two, and we can still have that progressive mentality where we want to push innovation, like with farming, with coming up with new ways to get more yield and all that, which is important, but also in a sacred way, where we can now have an understanding of what these indigenous cultures were so connected with, which is so important. And if we can bring those two together and get rid of the corporations and get rid of all that rottenness, that is the great kind of revolution that we can be a part of. So anyways, that's my rant. But
I want to add to that, because I think I'm totally in alignment with what you're saying. But one thing I'd want to put towards the greater community of people that would be listening to this and who are kind of on our frequency with this is that we must be diligent about infiltrators in this. And there already is an infiltration of that, kind of what you talked about. There is a UN document called UN DRIP, UNDRIP. It's the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I would highly encourage anybody who's on this frequency of what we're talking about, because I agree with 100% with everything you said. The thing is that we have to start to acknowledge is that if we're on the land, and we're all on the land, we're Indigenous. If you're born on the land, you're Indigenous. It's no longer about if you're part of the clans that were on this land before colonization. If you're born on the land, you're Indigenous. And so what UN DRIP is doing, and it's scary, because I could actually see this being a road. There's a couple different roads, paths that I see the UN, the sort of the New World Order trying to take everybody. One is sort of a Chinese subversive takeover. In Canada, it might just be a straight up takeover, not so in the US. Or this sort of UN takeover where they bathe it in social justice and, lefty stuff.
Sustainability. That's
yeah. And so the UN DRIP, you should really read that document, because the treaties are interesting. You can find so much amazing truth in the treaties, but the treaties tell you what they want to do. And so UN DRIP, they basically are saying that they've created a platform in which to give the land back to the Indigenous. But they don't define Indigenous in this document, which is very suspicious. But you know that if it's the UN, Indigenous is just going to mean they're going to appoint some crony from the UN and he's going to be the indigenous, right? It's not about actually giving us back to the land and getting rid of this whole Roman civil law, merchant law system, UCC. It's not about that at all, because you never hear that talked about at all. They try to bury that stuff as much as they can, though it's all there. The books are available. But that's what they're going to do. And if you look to which state was it just recently that gave half of the state back to the natives, not South Dakota. Which do you guys know what I'm talking about? This just happened in the U.S. like a month ago.
No, sorry.
They gave it back to the natives.
I remember seeing the headlines, but I'm blanking on it.
And they were quoting the UN drip. So so they've got a boilerplate now. Oh, I'm really annoyed that I can't remember what state it was because it just happened. And it's one of the northern Midwest states. But anyways, they've got a boilerplate
like
for
Montana or something.
No, it wasn't Montana. It was
Minnesota. It
might have been Minnesota.
It would make sense, Minnesota, because Minnesota's become a hotbed up there for progressivism and centralization and globalism, which is crazy because Minnesota you would think would not be that place.
I'm just gonna Google it and see what I get.
While you're looking that up, Curtis, I think that's an amazing point about Indigenous, because we're all Indigenous in present time. And if you go back to our ancestry, like European, Indigenous cultures with their own, not just cultures, but spiritual practices. And it's that same kind of thread of royalty and corporations that have tried to tame all the indigenous people. And even if you go back to North America, there was civilizations and people here living before the so-called Native Americans arrived. So you really
Oklahoma.
can't play this game who's
Oklahoma.
Indigenous. So who is it?
It was Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Oklahoma. I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they've got the boilerplate for this now. And the UN document is there, and so we have to be highly aware of their tricks, right? It's know thy enemy. We have to know the enemy, and these people will do anything and everything they can to lie and cheat, as they always have, and in a way give us the things that we think we want, to maintain their power. And I think this comes back to this. There's some kind of spiritual shift happening. What I believe it is I read a book a while ago called the Raw Contact, the channelings of Ra, and it's pretty out there.
The power of one, or
the power of one. Yep. And they talk about in that book what they refer to as the harvest, where there's these, I believe it's 11,000 year cycles where spiritual entities, which were all spiritual, plants included, have an opportunity to move up this pyramid of spiritual awakenness, and we're in that period right now. And so everything is transcending into a new level. And during these times, the power controllers, they want you to stay in your low mind reptilian brain frequency so that you can't find your path to divinity. And I think that's where we're at. And we have to transcend, because if we transcend, they become irrelevant very quickly. These elites that control all these things, they have to stay in their frequency, because to transcend toward divinity is to accept the what did they refer to it as? Basically devotion to others. So there's service to self and there's service to others.
Yep.
And the elites serve themselves, and all of us who recognize that we're part of the divine, we service others, and that's our life purpose.
This is one of our favorite topics, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Right on.
And I was going to say the elites are already irrelevant. And what they aren't considering is the larger universal patterns and cycles we talk a lot about on our show, and we get into waveform physics. And, it explains exactly how everything from the elements in the ground to the, to the rest of, whatever your belief system about planets or anything is, everything is on the same larger cycle, and it's moving along with or without us.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think the game that I think we're playing now is we're trying to get information out, we're trying to get solutions out,
Yeah.
so that people have an opportunity to make a choice as far as if they want to move on with the grander cycle or stay in a more archaic schoolroom in the universe somewhere. And but as far as how this outcome is, what's going to happen, it's already happened. And we're all here to make a choice. Do we want to stay slaves? Or David Icke, I think, says it best. It's like, now is the opportunity once and for all for humanity to get off its knees.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have what we call a common law assembly here in Kelowna, and it's a really amazing group. We basically, this is some really good solution based stuff for anybody. What we've done is we've got a bunch of men and women together who are all very awake. We've got three doctors in our group. We've got ex-cops, we've got farmers, we've got crypto guys, incredible moms and doulas, and amazing group. We've basically come together and said, you know what, we're going to make our own system now. We're not asking permission. It's not about a sovereign process of going through remedy and filing notices and none of that. Basically just coming together. We've written a proclamation and we all signed it with our thumbprints in red, as men and women do historically. And we basically created a document that expresses our intent to exist and how we want to exist in this world. And that is to be in service to one another, but protect the rights of the individual, and that no man, woman, corporation, or trust can own any other man or woman. We basically declared, it's kind of like the Mayflower in a way. It's kind of a declaration of independence, but we've taken it further because we've recognized our divinity in it. And one of our members has an interesting way of talking about it. He says that society is going to splinter off. The one society is going to go for 5G, and the other society is going to go for 5D. Yes. And that's going to be we're going to recognize and transcend this mortal shell, and be part of what we truly understand as divine, and service to one another and service to the greater whole. And then the other is going to continue down the matrix and get more technologically advanced, but also further removed from the true divinity. Because I think, it's always like layers of the onion. That's how I like to describe it, is that your godliness is at the center of the onion, and everything you've learned or been brainwashed with your entire life just adds layers to the onion and gets for you further and further away from what you truly are. And the whole 5G thing is to get everybody plugged into this thing. My brother basically lives in a virtual reality world, so he's gone towards the 5G side of it, and I definitely see myself going the other way, and people in our group do too. And we're hoping that we can just get more people locally involved in this and declare our own sovereignty. But it's more of a proclamation. This is what we are. This is who we are. And this is how we want to form our society, regardless of what any of these other geezers do.
Yeah, this is a big movement
I
right now. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Bear. I was just going to say, this is, you're not the only ones doing this. We know of a number of groups that are coming together right now and just doing their own charters, basically their own proclamations. And real quick on the Indigenous thing, I wasn't really stressing actual peoples. It was more I was talking about the theoretical philosophy of it. And Bear did mention a very important thing while you were looking up Oklahoma, is that even the current quote unquote Indigenous people that we refer to, which are the more like that supposedly came over from Asia, the Native Americans in North America, they came after an original people that before them, which we know has been covered up, which were the red-bearded, the redheads that were in North America that were preceded them. And so how far do we go back, right?
Exactly.
That's just a rabbit hole that goes forever. So it's really more of a philosophical, spiritual concept than actual real peoples that we're talking about. Go ahead, Bear.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think the reason why a lot of us, which is a good segue into a lot of what you're about, Curtis, is the greatest proclamation of sovereignty is to start growing your own food.
100%.
If you go back historically, when you want to conquer a people, what's the first thing you do? You cut off their food supply.
Attrition, right?
What's happening right now? People are completely unaware that there's not enough food out there, and we pay attention to those sorts of things, so we can already see this scarcity starting to happen. And I think it's no mistake that people like ourselves, kindred spirits, if you will, are going back to the land. And what's the first thing we do? We're growing our own food. If you don't grow your own food, how can you be a sovereign at all if you're still dependent on your lunch at the local deli?
Exactly. And that's the thing that really kind of annoys me about a lot of the sovereigns, because I do know a lot of them and I've been pretty deep into it for a while. And it's like, dude, yeah, okay, sure, you've gone through all this process, you've filed all these notices, you haven't paid tax in 10 years. Okay, that's cool. But you're living in an apartment in a big city and you're completely living in a monoculture. And it's like, all these things are layers, right? And because nature and sort of the 5D versus the 5G dichotomy is, and I'm not putting that out there as an ultimate dichotomy, because I know that things are more complicated than this, but you can't just have one without the other. You really have to do it all. Like, nature is diversified and interconnected and synergistic, and so is God, and so are we, because our bodies are of nature and of the land. But the corporate system is dead. It's a monoculture. It is soulless, and you can go on about it forever. But we need to recognize that these correlations to nature is not a monoculture. It's a polyculture that is infinitely diversified. And as soon as you are finding yourself in monocultures, whether that be the way you live, the way you get your food, how you take care of your own health, how you educate your children, the 5G, the new world order, the cabal, everything they do is monoculture in agriculture, monoculture through the media, monoculture through the mind, through monotheism. Everything they do is mono. Everything we need to do has to be the opposite of that. And so whenever I look at, if I'm trying to find truth in a certain thing, I can just look at it so simply and be like, yeah, well, basically do everything the opposite that they want to propose, because they want you to stay as far as they can away from the truth, and that is over here.
And of course, they term their proposed monoculture as diversification. So
yes,
just the classic inversion technique.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's funny. We're looking at the chat's great right now, and people are loving this. And, there's this idea that, God will, they're getting kind of spiritual here on the chat, and it gets depressing when you think about the scarcity issues, right? But we live in a place, this reality is abundance. It's based on abundance. And so obviously the inverters want us thinking everything's scarce, but what I was pointing out here was like, it's so easy for us to fix this if we understand abundance, and we just,
yes.
And we talked about this with Sayer G last week. He was asking about farming. Do we get way more back than we put in? And Bear, rightly so, explained like, yeah, you put one fruit tree seed down, and in a couple years, that gives you 10 years of food. And so Mother Nature, this planet, is based upon abundance, and we can really embrace that with it's just waking up and knowing this and getting in. And so for you, you've obviously showed this with what you've done on your farm and great techniques, but do you think with the way the monoculture has been set up and the way the systems are, we talked to like David Dubine, who I think you've talked to, we've had him on the show, and others who are really tied into the food shortage we're facing, and how even if we took over all the malls and with the grand solar minimum coming and everything and tried to get food production, it wouldn't be enough, right?
Right.
But so in your mind, do you think there are solutions by people kind of getting their own gardens going and getting self-sufficient on their own lands? And
There
just,
is. Can I step away for 2 seconds?
Yeah.
I'll be right back. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no worries. So, that is a good question. And I've heard a number of interviews with David, who we're going to get back on the show, where I think it was on Leak Project or something, where they were talking about, would it be possible if we do have the grand solar minimum coming and we have a lot of this monoculture taken out.
Sorry about that, guys.
Oh, you're good. You're good. I'm just continuing on this thought, how we can feed ourselves if we, we're facing calamity here. I've always stressed that it's up to the individual. And if you can even, obviously it's not ideal living in a tiny apartment in the middle of a city, especially now. And this hurts people a lot of times to hear this. You got to get out of the damn urban centers.
You have to get out.
You have to get out. And I know it sucks because I love, dude, my whole life I lived in San Francisco, LA, Baltimore. My wife and I loved living in cities, but we face the music and it's like, it's just not time right now. Now, hopefully we can get to that beautiful place where cities are these like amazing cosmopolitan places with gardens and healing centers and great culture again. But right now, when you have a rotten society and you have a rotten corporatized death cult running the world, where they want to funnel everybody into these cities, you got to get out and then just get, with sovereignty, a big part is growing your own food. And it's not hard. Like on a quarter of an acre, you can grow enough food for a family of 4, a family of 8 easily. Right, Curtis?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I've been doing it for a long time. I mean, and we're on a quarter acre here and we grow literally all the vegetables and most of the fruit that we consume in an entire year. That's with the winter. So I've been documenting that for a long time. But I did experience a bit of cognitive dissonance as the guy that's known as the urban farmer, with urban, to be honest. I mean, I still believe, everything I've ever taught, all is valuable. It's all true. You can do all these techniques, but I don't really have faith in the urban, especially the big urban. I'm in a smaller town, a city. It's not that small. It's 180,000 people. It's not small, but it's not big. This is even too big for me now. We're working on getting out of here. The problem with the cities is that, as you guys know, the bigger the city and the older the city, the more regulation and layers of corporatism there is. And so it's way easier to follow the path of least resistance, because I believe we have to move like nature, and nature always follows the path of least resistance. And if something's dying, it's better just to get out. And the cities are dying. Just look at all these lefty cities across the U.S. right now. Minneapolis is burning. Oregon is Portland, Oregon is burning. San Francisco has been a shithole for a long time. Even 10 years ago when I was going to San Francisco, it was a shithole.
I used to live there. I know.
It's insane. LA, I was in LA a couple years ago driving through Hollywood Boulevard, and it was a shithole. There was literally shit on the streets in Hollywood Boulevard and tents. So cities are dying. We need to get out. And like you said, it's hard to hear that, but you really do not want to be with the hordes trying to get out when everybody's trying to get out at the same time. If you're hearing this and you're thinking, but I got to do this and this and this, seriously, you have to take action, because come this November with this election, things could get very hairy in the United States. I'm pretty sure Trump will get reelected, but you never know. And if he does get reelected, there is going to be an absolute bloodbath. The New World Order is going to release the agents on a scale that we've never seen before. That's my belief. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But
I agree with that entirely. Mike and I are kind of political atheists together, and that we don't have a dog in either fight. But I take what's in there now. At least there's some nationalistic tendencies. but we're always conjecturing behind the scenes. We don't know who anybody is really.
I know.
Just before the show started, Mike and I were saying, well, do they really want him to get back in so they can start a civil war? Is he actually one of them, and he's just setting up and not who we believe he is? So there's so many game plans, and no matter who anybody is in the first place, you better believe that the think tanks already have it prefigured and game plan, so they're going to win 6 different ways no matter what happens.
Absolutely. And we're not particularly privy to that information. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it always comes back to, for myself, it always comes back to what I've been doing for the last 10 years, and that's growing my own food and working on a path to sovereignty of the individual, sovereignty of the immediate family, sovereignty of the immediate community, and then the greater community. And it works out like that, much like the permaculture zones. It's a similar thing. So we can grow a ton of our own food, and that's Mike, you're talking about David and Christian, the Ice Age guys.
Yep.
And I don't know what to believe, but I can say that I certainly see those patterns where I am. And I do know that in nature, a lot of the times you see the most telling patterns on the outliers. So this is just an observation of my own. It's not based in, it's based in a lot of things that I've read, but I'm not a scientist, but if you put everything on the traditional bell curve, the things on the outliers are the things that often tell what's going to come. And so I find for climate patterns, you look at the colder areas, and I'm seeing it getting colder, like significantly. This has been the coldest summer I have ever seen in my life. And for the last 6 years, I've been noticing this trend. Before I even was tapped into David Dubine and Christian from Ice Age Farmer, I was seeing these trends. I was like, man, winters are getting colder, longer. Shoulder seasons are getting longer and wetter. Summer's getting shorter. Like this summer is almost over here. Like this morning was cold. It's middle of August. It should be cooking right now. I wouldn't normally be in my greenhouse this time of day. Like it would already be way too hot to be in here, but it's very comfortable. And so I'm seeing these trends coming. But having said all that, I'm not concerned. And actually, in my last episode, I interviewed Christian from Ice Age, and I interviewed David from Adapt 2030. And my last one I did with David, we were just having a conversation before we started and after, and I just asked him do you think it's going to be so bad that it'll be winter in the summer here? And he said no, he didn't think so. I think we just have to get used to the fact that we're going to have weather instability. And the neat thing about that whole thing is it's kind of unifying in that there are people who think that global warming and that narrative that's been spoon-fed to us from the UN and all that is what's happening. And then there's some sort of fringe people, or at least outliers, that see this pattern with the grand solar minimum. I definitely am more on that side now. But at the end of the day, weather's changing. And as farmers and homesteaders, the best thing we can do is just learn how to adapt. And so, what it really comes down to with farming is get greenhouses up. It doesn't matter what climate you're in, because greenhouses in colder climates keep the frost off and allow you to do things in a longer season. But in a more of a temperate climate, call it something that's wet and hot, like on the southeast in the United States, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, all those types of places, Florida, greenhouses are useful because then they keep the rain off. And you use them in a slightly different way. You can use different types of greenhouses, but that's important. And then how you design your land, right? You want to design your land to either harvest water into the landscape or move water out of the landscape safely. And sometimes it's a bit of both, depending on where you are. But there's solutions for all of these things. We just need to get out there and use them, and don't be late. Everything we're talking about now, people need to be doing this stuff now. You got to get out of the city. If you're in the city, I got a lot of people reaching out to me that are like, well, what do I do? I'm in Vancouver. I'm in LA. I can't necessarily just pack up and leave. It's like, well, you kind of can. Just go to a smaller town, at least for now, to get your bearings. Just go rent a place in a smaller town for now. And then get just because the cities are going to be, at least the big cities, Chicago, Miami, LA, all those big cities in the US are going to be absolute hellholes when this stuff starts to
They're going to
down.
be part of FEMA. Definitely.
Man, I
FEMA
want people to
zones.
survive and thrive. So,
Well, one thing
Yeah.
you can do too is, thanks to the internet, you can find people that are on that same level with you on in your area, especially if you live in a big city with millions of people. There's Facebook groups, there's Telegram groups, there's stuff, and then you can actually go in on a space together. I know people that are doing this right now, and they're going in on buying farmland together,
yeah.
and then they're doing the slow transition. So I've got great news. I grew up in Orange County down in SoCal. I'm a SoCal boy, and my parents were still living down there. They're just putting an offer on a house in our little town here. So my mom was never going to do that. And that's showing so I'm feeling great because I'm getting my family out of the city. So you can work with your friends and family and come together. And it might seem really daunting at first, and also a lot of people still are holding on to the hope that, because I have friends that go, well, I don't want to miss going to concerts or going to cool movies or the mall or whatever. I'm like, dude, you can't go to that anymore right now. So it's like, this is a great opportunity. Like, COVID has actually been an amazing way to really wake up people. And I just think it's a great, I was telling a friend last night, it's not going back. It's not going back. We are in a new age now, and Agenda 21 is kicked in. 2020 was always what they said was going to be the first big year. And this is part of the whole global agenda. If people still believe that there's not a global agenda, go on to Google Maps. You can put in any address in the world and it will zoom up to you. We are in a global village. They have systems set up where they are controlling through AI and through the corporations that are really now consolidated into just a few, the narrative across the world. We are seeing a controlled demolition of the old way. And so this does really become a spiritual thing where, like you were saying, it's like, do you want to go down the 5G old school path towards being funneled into a city and being transhumanistic, like with stuff in you? And like, do you want to go that way? Or do you want to go the more new school way, which is what we're all about, which is going back to the land, getting into community, getting into cryptos, getting into growing your own food, homeschooling, unschooling your kids, understanding common law, natural law, like that's all happening too. And so we're seeing that great schism right now. It's like, are you going to be that way? Or are you going to be that way? It's time to pick.
And that's what vaccines are all about. It's about shutting down the human perceptive bandwidth so that we cannot reach into those higher realms of consciousness, because it's putting that foreign DNA that's our little antennas that are going to put us in more of an animal mode. So, it's really about our inner game, and that's where all the solutions lie. For instance, we talk about food shortages, but when you're really working on that, on yourself, which you find is you don't even need that much food anymore. In fact, if you look historically, people lived longer and were much more healthy because they didn't have the programming that you're supposed to be eating every day, all day long. One meal is fine. You can skip a day. If something were to happen to our food supply here and I didn't have to eat for 20 days, I could do it. It's not a problem. We should all be equipped to do that. But it's a sequential process to get to that spot. Just like growing food, you don't say, oh, I'm a prepper and I've got some food in storage. Well, it's like, well, you should have started your garden about 3 years ago if you want to be eating today. It's the same thing with the inner game. So that's what's really gratifying is I see a lot of people really going through those inner shifts. And you can tell that it's really not, in a lot of cases, not even that conscious. They're just changing without realizing. I remember talking to your mom, Mike, a few years ago, where she said, oh, no, I could never live up here. And now she's moving up here and she's totally digging on it and excited about it. And so you see a lot of people, making those changes. And the last comment I'd say is, if you go back to our sovereignty conversation and the paperwork, in hindsight, if you ask me, would I do it over again? Absolutely not. I think in some way, as far as the physical part of it, it was a waste of my time. On another part, what it allowed me to do is come to an understanding that yes, we have all been deceived and enslaved. And then when you realize you have a choice, now you can start wrapping your mind around greater truths of who we are as individuals and our true creative potential and what we're all really supposed to be here doing, not just as a matter of choice, but as a matter of responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and it's cool to talk to you, Bear, because it's yeah, I always appreciate the conversations with elders who have gone through that process, and it's nice to hear you say that, because that's really where I'm at too. That's why we actually formed our common law assembly. We basically had a boilerplate from a man named Kevin Annett, who I'd done some podcasts with on Liberty on the Land. He's the guy who kind of blew the whistle on the satanic ritual abuse that was happening in the residential schools here in Canada, still happening. And he had done some amazing things, partly with a group of people that made Pope Ratzinger resign under allegations of child sex trafficking. And they did this through a common law assembly and forming common law courts.
Wow.
And it's powerful. It's very powerful. And the people in our group are mostly veterans and have been through the process and been through the ringer a little bit. We actually just watched one of our guys go to prison last Friday, which was a little bit sad. He'll be out soon, though. It won't not too long, but yeah, it's going through the process and all that stuff. I mean, I started it, I went really deep down a year ago, and now I'm just focused on this. I actually kind of realized something through my conversations with Owen Benjamin. Him and I become pretty good friends, and we just text each other and stuff. And he says, pay Caesar with Caesar's. And I think there's a lot of, I don't know where he got that statement from. It might go back to something, maybe even the Bible. But there's a lot of interesting truth and deep truth wrapped up in that, is that, we're in this system, which I refer to as the Holy See, because that's the corporation that is the Vatican. That is, in my opinion, the top institutions of the world, at least one of the ones that are visible. And we're all swimming in this Holy See. We're drowning in it, in fact. We're lost at sea. We're swishing around trying to figure out where the hell we are. But this whole thing is shifting. There's a new tide that's come in. And it's beyond what a lot of us can understand and comprehend in our human minds. And I think we just have to kind of, instead of trying to swim to a new island or something like that, we got to come together and we got to hold ourselves up in our life rafts and kind of piece together little communities. And I like to metaphorically refer to it as, we need to be like weeds in the concrete, because it's like, sometimes you see little cracks in the sidewalk, and then dust blows in, that turns into soil, a seed gets in there, it germinates, it makes its way through, taproot comes down, starts to break the concrete. And then when those clusters come together, it really starts to break the concrete. And it's amazing how fast it can happen. And I think that's metaphorically kind of where we're at with our common law assembly, is that we're in this thing and it's dying. And so there's cracks coming through. There's a lot of cracks coming down. The concrete's dilapidated and a little bit old. And there's a lot of opportunities for dust and seeds to get in there. And we just need to break through it. So it's not about just going to a new place and forming a new colony or a new country. We're here. There's nowhere else to go, at least in the physical realm. But we need to just come together and make things happen as if this whole thing is going to disappear. Because I think it is. My prediction is that, and I could be wrong, and I'm open to other arguments that might offer insights that I might be missing. But I think that this old system is just dying on it's a cancer to itself, and it's unsustainable. And because there's this spiritual harvest and this shift happening, that's also accelerating this dying of this old system. And all these old geezers are going to retreat to their bunkers in Colorado or wherever, their castles and bunkers in Israel or wherever they go. And they're going to just kind of wait it out a little bit and see what we do. And one of the things that I think we need to be very conscious of is, as we move into this new world, or maybe it's an old world, I don't know, it's something. And we need to be aware that when the dust settles, these infiltrators will come back. And so I think we're going to have people like us who are into these higher frequencies, and also have technical skills that can help people right now on the land and produce value and resources and feed people and all that, we're going to be very valuable. We already are. And we're going to form our little fiefdoms, our little colonies and all this stuff. And we're going to make these things happen over the next 10 years. And, you know, in 10 years from now, there could be a lot of the dust settled. It could be like a totally different world that's fractionated. It's very decentralized. There's no like US border to Canada anymore. It's just kind of colony here, colony there. And once the dust settles, we're going to see these infiltrators come out. And they're going to try to get into our communities, just like the sheriff of Nottingham from Robin Hood, who kind of comes around and is collecting taxes and reminding us that we still are obligated to pay and all this stuff. But probably during this time, we'll already have our own different types of currencies set up. We'll have our own farming and energy systems, our own grids and all this. But they're going to come back and try to reestablish themselves as the powers that be or the authorities in this. And I think that's that's when the true test will be, is can we during all this transition, can we get rid of all the conveniences? Because that's like when we're telling people to get out of the city, we are telling them that you're going to have to live an inconvenient life for a little while. But it's going to be really inconvenient when everybody else loses all the same stuff at the same time. That's when it's going to really suck, because you don't want to be in that rush hour line trying to get out of the city when everybody else is getting out. You want to do it now. And so can we, over the next 10 years, accept that we're going to ignore all of these conveniences in exchange for a new form of liberty, one that we've actually never, as a collective, never really experienced? Are we ready for that? And can we weather the storm for the next little while when we go through massive societal, cultural, economic, environmental shifts? Are we going to be ready to get through that and then see the new day at the end of the tunnel when people are coming after us and they want to take over our little fiefdoms?
Yeah. And I think what's happening today is really an opportunity for each of us to see what is really essential and what's not essential. As an example, a couple weeks ago, I went into the local health food store. It's ways away into town. We make the journey there every so often. And, you know, we provide for most of our food here. On the other hand, there's little conveniences I like at the local health food store. And so we were turned away because you have to wear a mask now. We know everybody down there personally. They're saying, hey, sorry, Dr. Bear, you know, but you can't come in. And I go, okay, no problem. So I just said, well, nothing personal, but I'm never going to shop here again, ever. I don't care if you change your policy tomorrow. I'm not coming back, and that's cool. No bad. Love you guys. And when I went home, it's like very empowering, because my wife and myself, we said, okay, what do we get from the health food store? And it's like this, well, we don't have to have that. We can get this somewhere else. We can start growing that. And so little by little, we're just paring away, testing ourselves to see how much of that out there we really need, how much is essential. And I realize now I don't need to go to that store anymore. And that's just a small example of many so-called things we think are essential in our life that really aren't. And we can provide for ourselves. And again, it goes back to prior times where people didn't think that they needed, you know, all their little Tootie Pops and know, treats that they get from the store, and didn't have to eat all the time. So this can be a very empowering time.
And it can. And I think, sorry, Mike, I'll just say one thing real quick, it's better to get used to those inconveniences now, because in a relatively short period of time, it's going to be a lot more uncomfortable. And so might as well start making action now.
Yeah, and I was just going to say on the flip side too, what we talk about is on the medicine and health sovereignty. We've also had this idea that whenever something's wrong, we got to go to the medical center or to, you know, the hospital. But really, that's something that we really stress, is that getting empowered to know your body better and how your actual, you know, why you do and shouldn't get sick and all that is so important, because that's a huge part of the sovereignty, and something that I think it's tough, because as you said, there's lots of different levels of sovereignty, right? And you could literally spend your rest of your life just on the common law, natural law, equity law stuff. So there's a fine balance. And I think there's a chatter here in the chat here is like, you know, I wish I could just hire somebody I think it was Steiner to God said, I wish I could just hire somebody to do all this common law stuff for me and help me with the land patent. I'm like, well, it doesn't, and he understands this. It doesn't really work that way. You got to do the work yourself.
You do. Yeah.
But who has time for that, right? And as Bear is saying, maybe that we're past that. So I think we as a community can help each other out and kind of find that fine balance of like, finding your tribe and your community to help with each other, but then understanding just enough on these different levels of health sovereignty, food sovereignty, also money sovereignty, of course, and all that, so that we can kind of all feel more empowered, but also not overwhelmed, because I think this can get really overwhelming to folks, especially those who are just kind of getting into this stuff and be like, wow, so I got to now like get the commercial codes and I got to learn how to do herbalism and I got to,
no,
it's like
herbalism would be more useful. I will say, the thing is with the sovereignty stuff, one thing people have to realize, and I have to say this because people always email me and they want to pay me for remedy. It's extremely risky selling remedy. I know guys and girls that have paid a massive price, like massive lawsuits, completely bankrupted, time in jail for selling remedy. You have to be so careful. And so I don't sell remedy to people. I mean, I talk about this stuff and then people reach out and they're like, hey, yeah, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? It's like, no, man, you have to figure it out yourself. And that's part of the process. And you know what? That's kind of what our common law assembly is all about, is like basically said, okay, what's an ideal world look like for us? And for me, a principal idea of it is a world where everybody has skin in the game. Everybody has accepted responsibility and that they are an equal player in this. And if you're not willing to be an equal player and you want to just live in a society where everything's convenient and hand delivered to you, then you're not gonna do well in this kind of new type of situation. I always want to say new world, but I hate the association with new world order, so I try to avoid saying that. But to me, the new system is got to be where everybody has a stake, everybody has skin in the game, and because the minute we start taking these conveniences, and that's how Owen Benjamin calls them the grabblers. I like that term. That's how the grabblers get us, right? Is they get us on our vices, they get us on these conveniences, and they always win us over that way because we just want to be lazy and do nothing, right? And so if we fall into those temptations, then we're going to end up in the same place.
They're all offerings. That's all it is, right?
Yep.
They're offering us these things, and it literally goes back to the Garden of Eden. It goes back to what the Bible says. It's like the temptations, and if we go with those temptations, we really are. In the end, it's a very empowering idea. It's like we are the ones in power.
Yep.
And so it's that's what Alfa Vedic's all about, is the solutions and helping people understand that, and understanding that's why we've gone in depth about germ theory and understanding that you don't need the vaccines, you don't need the allopathic interventions. In the same way that Bear mentioned, you don't need to be eating, the old food pyramid is BS. You don't need to have that caloric intake to survive and all that. You don't need to have stacks of gold and silver per se. Actually, Curtis, you did a really cool little message about surviving the impending collapse, about would you need stacks of gold and silver and all that? No, you need understanding your skill sets and understanding what you can provide to community. Really more empowering probably to learn how to build soil and to grow food, or to know how to heal others, or cook, do things like that, versus being the guy that's prepped out to the core with every kind of possible shekel that you can get. So it's but also one thing we stress is also you don't get overly burdened with this, like in terms of having to prep for every possible thing, and like have fun with it. I think that's important. Like,
you gotta have fun. You have to enjoy it.
Yeah, life's short still, no matter what. And it's like, don't let this get, because then they win too, right? The grabblers win too if now you're completely obsessed with prepping, or completely obsessed with how you're going to get Bitcoin, or how you're going to get gold, or how, it's you feel empowered, start taking responsibility for your sovereignty, but also, you got to have balance in your life.
You do. And you
and
have to
getting
enjoy it.
connected. And getting connected with farming and growing your own food, you can talk about all the things that are going on in the world, but as soon as you get outside and just start tending your garden, you forget about it all. You're in the frequency of the earth. You're surrounded by nature. You're getting imbued by all those patterns that refresh our memory of the way things are supposed to be.
Yep.
And all of these processes, sovereignty processes, growing your own food, everything, what it's ultimately doing is bringing us to that place of ultimate sovereignty, where we're aware of every thought and feeling that ripples through every cell of our body. And you go back in time where, people would go into Shaolin monasteries and things, and then they'd be able to do these superhuman things after years. All they did was debug themselves so that they didn't have all these overlay thought patterns that were interfering with what we would just naturally do on our own. And the fact is our entire reality as individuals are a composite of electrical forces that we have put into motion ourselves. So we're the only ones that can control them in the first place. And I believe that's where humanity's going. And of course, we don't have to be, complete masters, but if you're just at least on the road, what we've learned, on that path, there are larger forces that you're now in that slipstream, and you have really the power of the universe at your back and protecting you at the same time. So you develop a trust behind that, and you just stop sweating all the small stuff all the time.
Yeah, because the cabal want us to constantly be in fear, right? That's we all know that intuitively too. Anybody who's been on a path to truth knows that on a fundamental, principled, and spiritual level, that they control us through fear, and they do that in all kinds of ways, right? And they control a lot of the truther community through that way too, right? I mean, I experienced that where a number of years ago, well before all this stuff became more mainstream with QAnon and all that, I discovered the child sex trafficking and all that shit years ago, and man, it was a dark time. I went way deep into like the bloodlines of the Illuminati and all that stuff, and went really, really, really balls deep with all this stuff, and I caught myself, because at that point in my life, I was so aware of cognitive biases and all this, and I caught myself succumbing to the fear porn, and how they basically will even use the truth of their own system to traumatize you into submission. And I found myself being so depressed and sickened by all this sick shit that they do, which is all true as far as I can tell. It's all true. But they can use that to control you, because at the end of the day, if you get so traumatized by pursuing the truth that you just throw your hands up and go, oh, what's the point? We're all fucked. So forget all of it, and that's what I see so many truthers doing, is they get so deep into it that they just think everything there's no hope for anything. And I see it in my comments on my YouTube channel, where people are like, oh, well, what are you going to do when the hordes come for you, Curtis? It's like, dude, you're just making excuses for yourself. You're just making excuses for yourself. You're sitting here criticizing me for trying, but you're projecting everything as like a mirror, and you're just projecting your fear that's incapacitated you from doing something. And that's what, at the end of the day, I see. And the truther community is so full of that, and it bums me out, because I want people to be empowered. I don't want people to just get bummed out about all these big shifts. I want you to just use the truth to help navigate you up to a path to empowerment, enlightenment, and sustainability, and regeneration, right? And a path to transcendence. That to me, that's what the truth should be. It should be a vehicle to help you navigate these territorial waters to get to something that's greater.
Yeah, more Steiner, less Alex Jones.
Exactly. And I have to admit, Alex Jones, was part of my, 10, 15 years ago, not 15 years ago, probably listening to some of his stuff did get me on a path, when he released that first video of Bohemian Grove was like, holy shit, but Alex Jones, I don't know what's up with that guy. Like, do you guys, are you familiar with Bishop Larry Gator's Global Spiritual Revolution Radio?
I don't think I am.
He's a pretty switched on dude. He's a bishop out of New York, and a really great radio show. Really goes down the rabbit hole, deeper than a lot of people. But Alex Jones,
has he been on Jason Goodman's show lately a lot?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
I know
I
him.
am aware.
Jason, he's a black bishop.
Yes, he's awesome.
Yeah.
I love listening to him.
Dude, Larry Gators is high level, very high level.
Yeah, he's got a great voice.
I've actually listened to him.
Here's the thing that I realized about Alex Jones had Larry Gators on the show, and Larry Gators is full of like little wormholes that can take you in all directions, but he's really knowledgeable. And he brought up on InfoWars, and I don't listen to Alex Jones anymore, but I sometimes just check in on him to see what he's saying. And actually, it was because Larry shared his episode that he was on Alex Jones with on his channel. That's how I listened to it, because I don't actively listen to Alex Jones anymore. I haven't for years. But Jones was talking to Larry about all this stuff, and Larry Gators went right to the Organic Act, 1871. And Jones completely diverted him, and in a very sneaky way. He didn't do it by like shutting him up or stopping his mic or anything like that. He just did it by really emphasizing other things that he wanted him to talk about. And so he kind of in a positive way, and that's a trick, that's a trick right out of how to win friends and influence people.
Jones, Jones, like I'm doing right now, he always interrupts. If you notice on the interviews, he always interrupts at people, and
it's obnoxious.
Yeah.
But he did this to Larry Gators, and I was like, what happened to Alex? Because to me, that's some real gravy. That if more Americans understood, and that there is no constitution and all this stuff that all these patriots think is like all this great system that we have, and it's all bullshit. If more preppers and truthers found that out, we would have a revolution a lot quicker, in my opinion.
Yeah,
at least in the U.S.
Gary, so he was the one talking about the Civil War and how the Underground Railroad was really just a way to bring slaves up to the north.
Yep.
And he really calls out all the truth about the history of the United States with the Civil War, and how it was just the corporatization of everything, and how it was the North really trying to corporatize the South. I mean, it's just, there's so much. One thing that I always say is like, we just don't even know our history at all. I know.
And he really gets into the whole history of what you would, I don't know what else to call it, but like the Black Illuminati.
I love it. What does he call that?
Do you recall the term? I've got it on the tip of my tongue.
Something Rose or
no, it's the Boulay Secret Society.
Yes.
Yeah,
man. Supposedly Kobe Bryant was involved with. And goes down, all that stuff.
All those big players.
Well, the greatest fear of the controllers is that all of humanity is going to get together and say, wait a minute, we aren't the enemy. We've all been played against each other. And, then it's end game. Then it's over.
We're the ones we've been waiting for. Yeah.
And of course, now we're wearing masks, which means that we're not only divided by racial lines, but we're, you can't even tell who you're talking to.
I know.
And
that's by design, right? And that's the one thing that's really been pissing me off recently, because there was only like a 2-week period when this thing started to really roll out. It was January 29th. I was trying to fly to Phoenix, and I got turned away. I was held up at the TSA for fucking 9 hours, and then they flew me back home. I couldn't even get into the US. That was January 29th. I saw this thing starting to roll out. Then there was like a 2-week period where I wasn't sure. I was like, is this actually real, or what's going on? But right after that, I've called this whole thing out as BS. And the thing that's really pissing me off now, I try to not let it get me angry, is the masks. It's like the numbers are down. It's so obvious. In Canada here, you can go right to the Statistics Canada website and get all the data right there. And it's no different than a flu every other year. It's all there. They just when all these pundits, you guys have Dr. Birx or Fauci, we've got in BC here, we've got Dr. Bonnie Henry. These people come out on the news every single day and they say, oh, this many people died of COVID, whatever. It's like, if they've been doing that for the last 50 years with all the flu deaths, we'd be in the same situation. And it's starting to really drive me nuts because the masks. There's more masks out now, despite the numbers being down and being in the middle of summer when it's dry. Like, nobody's catching a flu or cold in the summer here, very rarely. More people are wearing masks. The thing that really annoys me as a parent, because I have 2 small children, is that, you know, I've done a lot of research on child developmental psychology, and it's been a real fascination of my wife and I's, because we're really into unschooling and then that whole path, is that a child's mind for the first 7 years is an absolute sponge. They will base their children are completely programmable in that time, and that Hitler knew that, Stalin knew that, Mao Zedong knew that. That's why they wanted to get your kids early. But this is what's happening right now, is that these masks. So if your child is going out and seeing people with masks everywhere, think about what they're not learning about human psychology and communication. You're not seeing this part of the face move. That child is not going to be developing their brain the same way as a kid would just years ago. And that's why for myself and my wife, it's so important for us to actually get out of this train wreck, because I don't want my children seeing people wearing masks. We've done a fairly good job of keeping them from it. But yesterday we went out to go get some takeout. We have some family visiting right now, and they're from Ontario, and it's totalitarian in Ontario right now. It's just like Australia, and you have to wear masks and all this. And my mother's my mother-in-law's husband was wearing a mask when he went to the restaurant the other day, and my daughter's like, why is he wearing a mask? And that was the first time that she'd actually asked me up until this point. And we're just realizing, like, yeah, we want to get out of here so that we can wait this thing out, because I don't know how long the mask thing will be going on for. It might be years, but I don't want my kids missing out on that part of their development.
Well, it's the new war on the invisible. So we had the war on drugs, the war on terror. Now we have the war on microbes. And they use these things to create the divide and conquer and you know, the mechanisms for control. So unfortunately, now we're at the war against microbes. So if you extrapolate that out, it's just more ridiculous than anything. What are you going to be white? Microbes are good. Like, so anyway, it's like, yeah, the same thing here in our little town. Thank God people don't take it seriously at all. And we still have our Sunday get-togethers, our hootenannies and like everything. But yeah, the thing with children, you're spot on. Like, it's a psychological kind of, you know, war really going on. And it's one thing I was saying is with Sayer G last week, it's a divide and conquer tactic where those who aren't wearing masks are kind of now spotted as the people that are more awake to the idea of what the psychological kind of operation is going on. And now it's easy to pick them out more.
That's what's kind of cool.
Yeah. So you see that there's memes about it, right? You see the guy without the mask. You're like, yeah, man. But the point is too, it also reconfirms this, this kind of, communal brainwashing that's going on, like with our partners down in LA. Bryden was saying yesterday, like, you can't even go outside and run or bike. Everyone has masks on, biking and running and doing sports
in Los Angeles, where it's hot and dry, like
and terrible air quality to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, it defies all logic, and that's where, you know, the programming has been really successful. Like, I hate to say it, but it has been.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bar.
No, sorry, you go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I was just going to say, like, you know, I've been on this path for a long time, and, you know, I was well awake way before this COVID stuff started. And like, when all this stuff started, I would honestly thought if we would have had this conversation 8 months ago, and we were kind of jamming on the same wavelength, I would have been like, man, the mainstream media has lost its grip. Like, people aren't buying this shit. But
yeah,
I was wrong. The mainstream media still has its grip, and it's been amazing how successfully they've pulled off this hoodwink, and people have bought into it.
They're brilliant. No doubt about it. And, you know, we're talking about the divide and conquer technique, you know, by dividing groups of people, but the ultimate is they've divided us all from the natural order. And the war against microbes is, great. I mean, we're afraid of everything there is to do with nature. We're afraid of microbes. We're afraid of the sun. We're afraid of everything. We're afraid of natural foods. There's always a study that says, oh, this herb has this in it and it could be detrimental. So it's just the most amazing psyop. And I think you can appreciate as, some people now are waking up to the fact that the data is all skewed and the so-called virus really isn't causing that many deaths. But now imagine in my profession as a bioterrain specialist, where we know another whole side of microbes, what their real role is. And just like on our show, we've had myself, people like Andrew Kaufman, MD, that all have a different story about, what viruses really are, what they aren't, and what their real function is, which is very, not just benign, but actually very supportive to health and longevity. And I've spent, over 40 years in my profession being gaslighted, and trying to convince people that, that's not the cause of disease. And there's one particular system of medicine that draws in a very evidence-based way the correlation between our own state of consciousness and how that translates holographically into the body. So try going there with most people, when they're still in the germ paradigm. It's literally trying to extract people out of the Stone Age.
It is. And it's the propaganda campaign has been running a long time. I mean, I even started to notice it when I was in my earlier stages of my farming career and getting out in the world and getting invited to conferences in the United States and stuff like that, and being a keynote speaker and going to these like environmentalist conferences, the whole, like climate change and all this stuff. I started to become aware of it, that whole like global warming thing. It was global warming, then it was climate change, now it's climate catastrophe and all that. And a lot of it is true in some ways, though. Just like the inversions of the elite, it's often the opposite of the opposite is true. So they tell us it's global warming, it's actually global cooling. But I started to see their techniques in the environmentalist movement. And, you go down that rabbit hole, you discover the Club of Rome with David Rockefeller and Maurice Strong, a bunch of cronies that basically drafted up this whole scam to unite the world. But they started to do it in the media 20 years ago, around 20 years ago, might even be a bit more now, when they started this whole narrative of trust the science and trust the scientists and trust the experts, right? And you've seen them, they greased the wheels with all that propaganda and those mantras for the last 20 years. And then when those whole like COVID's thing started happening, they hammered it. They hammered it so hard, and it worked incredibly because everybody's been propagandized with all these like so-called academics who are just funded by all these globalist organizations and government money, basically. That now when all the skepticism started rolling out, and they even rehearsed for it with Event 201, as I'm sure you guys are familiar, they ran through the script, and then they just decided, okay, well, we just need to double down on this whole thing of don't believe anything that doesn't come from a bona fide expert that we've approved, right? And so they've really done a good job of compartmentalizing us, who they would label as conspiracy theorists, into this little corner. But I don't think what they anticipated is that corner's massive. and all of us are in this life raft, and it's a massive life raft. Like I think the amount of people that are awakened throughout this whole thing, I don't know if they saw that coming. Maybe they did. I mean, I did read the lockstep document that the Rockefeller Foundation published, and they did anticipate there being massive civil unrest from this, and that people wouldn't buy into the lockdowns, and they did, and there would be pushback. But I mean, I think we have to be careful in assuming that our enemy is stupid. They're not. They're really, really smart, and they've really thought through a lot of these things. But what I'm trying to get my head around is the pushback that they're getting, like we just saw in Berlin, massive, looked like 1 million people out there. Is that going to the script that they want, or is there an element of, something that they didn't predict there, and it's kind of
That's the biggest question. I feel like they're 100 years ahead especially with their think tanks, their AI systems. They're running all the different possibilities, but the one thing that they can't stop is nature. This
Yeah.
is what we've been seeing is man's ego trying to destroy and conquer nature. And no matter how many models and stuff that they're running, I feel like they can't stop spirit, they can't stop light. And so as long as there are enough of us that are embracing the light, I think in the end, no matter how much chaos theory and everything that they're doing, they're gonna run up against it. And the Berlin thing is a great example of how crazy the dichotomy has gotten. So I know some people that were there, and they swear there was at least 800,000 to 1 million people there, and then the official media was saying 17,000. So how do you go from 17,000 to 1 million? Like, that is such a crazy dichotomy of truth. And we're living in kind of the anti-truth world now, right? Where because of the internet and everything. So that's a great like microcosm of the macro. And so anyway, we're starting to run up on time now, but you did make a brilliant notion there, is that the idea is that there is a massive amount of people waking up right now, and they're being forced to because their careers, their businesses are being destroyed. And while they are acknowledging this and knowing that Agenda 21 is they're using this to destroy people's lives so they can focus them into these smart cities and get the all the automation systems set up, the AI systems set up, the global currency set up, all that's all anti-nature.
Yeah, it's monoculture, right?
It is all monoculture, and that all fails in the end. It all fails. So it's a Ponzi scheme. They got to keep pushing forward because they know it's going to fail if they don't keep the wheel going towards the next system of scam, right? Yep. So, the question is, I don't know, man. It's just, we could talk about this forever, trying to project it and see where it's going to go. But the point in the end, I guess, is get spiritual, get into, your own people that kind of see where you want to go, and just get active in nature. I feel like nature will always help us and point us the way, as Bear was saying, like just by going out and getting your hands in the dirt, can go a long way. So.
And where they really shot themselves in the foot is they lost their tether from the emotional plane. And when I say emotion, not human lower emotions, but, on elevated emotions, just feelings of compassion and love. And because they live so exclusively on the mental plane, they're very shrewd on that level. Absolutely. But the thing that really allows things to pop into the matrix, so to speak, as that level of emotion, because that's what gives the electrical forces the velocity in order to manifest into our physical plane. So they have literally divorced themselves from that. They're living totally on the mental plane, and they actually require our energy because a lot of us are still connected there.
Yes.
They need our energy in order to create anything in the first place. So if we can just wrap our minds around the fact that they are nothing without us in the first place, without the currency that we provide for them, then again, it's game over. But Curtis, I've enjoyed our conversation with you so immensely. And, it's people doing what you're doing in your age group that give people like me hope. And that, I look back on some of the trials and tribulations that myself and my peers went through, it makes it all worthwhile. And I just want to say thank you for being here today. Thank you for all your efforts. And I really look forward to connecting with you again.
Anytime, you guys. This has been an incredible conversation. It's so cool to connect with kindred spirits. And I just want to say one other thing, just to add to what you said at the end there, Bear, is that what we have to realize, and I mean, hopefully this can be some inspirational parting words for people, is what we all need to realize is that as we're part of the Creator, we have to understand and know that in our deepest of parts of our soul. And there's creators and there's connivers. The people that control the world as we've seen it in our life, they're all connivers. They're not creators. They've rejected their divinity. They've rejected that which makes us powerful, because they've used us to make them powerful. We are the creators. We are the godly ones. We are the divine. And as soon as more people start to realize that and embody that and then transpose that into their existence, this whole show ends very quickly, because we are so powerful in our divinity. We just have to realize that and make things happen. And I'm not, I give people real tools that they can do to manifest that in the gardens, on the farms, and on the land. And there's and a lot of you guys provide other perspectives. There's many other ways to do this, right? But we have to realize that as the creator, they don't have power over you. They need you to give them power.
Yeah, and on that notion too, and that's amazing. You hit the nail right on the head. There's a character, and this is a really inspiring story that I just discovered. This guy Jack Schwartz. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. Bear probably is. He was a survivor of the Holocaust. He was actually a converted Catholic. He's Dutch. And while he was being abused and tortured because he was a double spy that was caught and put back into the hardcore concentration camp, he went deep, deep, deep inside of himself and got connected to God and found out it's all through love. Everything is love. And he stopped hating his torturers. And what happened is he was able to control his body to the point where he couldn't feel pain anymore. He could heal himself instantly. And he started traveling around after he went to America and became like a magician. But he would actually went to I think Stanford University and a bunch of universities, and he was able to put needles through his arms and heal himself instantly. And it was all because he tapped into that creative force of love. He said that's the universal, and he called it the word. It's the word of God, which is love. Mm-hmm. And he was able to literally heal himself instantly. And really that's how much power we really have. And he was able to train people to do that and stuff. So look him up, Jack Schwartz, but a very inspiring story. He was kind of like pre-Wim Hof, able to use his own breath and ability. And like I said, tapping into that to heal himself. And so we have that power. It's right here. And he could levitate and all this crazy stuff. So anyways, cool stuff, man. And it's just been a great talk. And if anybody wants to follow you and get involved more with what you're doing, where's the best place for them to go, Curtis?
Yeah, they can. So the majority of my content now is up on my own membership site. I've decentralized away from the monoliths, fromthefield.tv. I still post to YouTube. Not much though. It's kind of a legacy channel for me now. It's, there's almost 1,000 videos up there. I'll keep posting there, but I'm prepared for that whole ship to sink at some point. So I've, prepared for that. theurbanfarmer.co is my website around my book. If they want to find me on YouTube, they just search Urban Farmer Curtis Stone. All my truth-based content, I've moved to BitChute, just because I didn't want to compromise my YouTube channel, because I didn't want the farming stuff to get deleted if they deleted me for speaking the truth. So go to BitChute and just search me there. BitChute's search engine actually sucks, but if you dig around, you'll find me. Liberty on the Land is my podcast. Also, libertyontheland.com was the website for that podcast. And yeah, that's pretty much everything where I am.
Wonderful. Hey, thanks again, Curtis. This has been an amazing talk. And on the chat, people are already like, I got to listen to this thing again. I mean, super empowering. And that's what we're really all about. If you guys enjoyed this talk, go to alfavedic.com to find out more. You can join our community at Telegram, t.me/Alfa Vedic. It's a very busy community, a lot of amazing chatter, and a lot of big time influencers in there, people really changing the world, doing amazing things. So please join us. And awesome, Curtis is in there, like Sayer's in there, Kelly Brogan. I mean, a lot of our guests are in there, so you can message them direct. They're active in there. This is really what's so fun is that, we're coming together using their own tools against them. So that's, the whole paying Caesar with Caesar, that's the kind of the idea, right? It's like, I'm just going to use what they have, against them so that I can focus on what I need to do to be empowered. So it's a cool tactic and something that we do, but so we're still on YouTube. We still use Patreon. I know Patreon is a lot of problems with it, but we're using it right now because it's there. And then as we build our own decentralized systems to have our own co-op, Speaking of our co-op, you can go to patreon.com/Alfa Vedic, join the co-op there. We do a monthly Zoom meeting for our executive members. Eventually our plan is to be completely off that and be actually on a real decentralized blockchain-based system where we all are running our own internet on our own nodes. And so we're all working towards that, but we got to use their systems against them too while we can, might as well. So Telegram, Discord's great too. And then, of course, we're on BitChute, but I haven't really posted because we're kind of small still. So YouTube, we're kind of flying under the radar. But our plan is to eventually, obviously, get off YouTube and off what I call these gulags, the Twitters, the Facebooks, and really get on these decentralized platforms. Library's another good one. And then, of course, our Cordo project, we're moving forward. We'll have decentralized web hosting through that. So everybody will have their own blogs and websites on completely off the ISPs and off that. So that's really the future where we're going. Everybody, thanks so much for joining us today, and get outside, go grow, get your hands in the dirt, go on a hike, enjoy nature. She'll point you in the right direction always. Cheers.